Happy Friday. Hope everyone is having a great morning so far. I woke up a little bit tired. I had a really good day and a great night. If you're Sheila, you're in the chat, you know you were part of the day yesterday. It was so exciting. So after I left the courthouse, I picked up my kids and I had dinner plans last night with Barbara Butcher. And if you guys don't know Barbara Butcher, oh, sorry, my phone just started going off. If you don't know Barbara Butcher, you have to follow her. She was New York City's first female death investigator. She worked for the medical examiner's office for such a long time, and she's actually the one of the stars of Homicide New York on Netflix. So she's got short blonde hair, but she's amazing. And we ran into Gloria Allred, which was so crazy at dinner. And of course, I talked to everybody. So I ran up to Gloria and I was like, oh my gosh, can we get a selfie? And I was like, I saw you at the courthouse. And it was really fun. But the reason I'm hopping on today is because I want to go over a couple things. I want to play George Gascon's clip from CNN. That's number one. And he did an interview the other day about the Menendez brothers, and also the recent debate that he had with Hochman, who he's running against in LA for the position of DA. And it looks like Hochman is ahead of Gascon in the polls. So my question here is, what could this mean for the Menendez brothers? So let's go ahead, and I'm going to share my screen first off, and I'm going to play CNN's interview first. So we can watch that and then just analyze what we think is happening or what's going on. Because I actually haven't watched the entire interview yet. Let's see. Here we go.
This is Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon. Mr. Gascon, what about this new evidence presented in the petition filed by lawyers for the Menendez brothers? How was this evidence discovered, and what's your take on all of this?
Well, hi, Jim. First of all, thank you for having me here. Look, we have two different petitions, and I know it gets a little complicated, but basically, as Camilla indicated, one is basically asking the court as a habeas petition, is asking the court to take a quick look and see if there's evidence that had that evidence been presented to the jury and the court during the trial, the outcome might have been different. The other one is a resentencing motion, and that basically is asking to take a look at the original sentence and see whether there should be a different type of sentence, given that they have rehabilitated and there's a whole list of things that they have listed. I started looking at this case very closely several months ago, and I have increasingly became concerned that it was critical that we review the new evidence that is being presented, as well as evidence that have been suppressed during the second trial.
I'm really glad he is looking at it. He said a few months ago, he got it over a year and a half ago. I've discussed this. I know that LA is busy, but just pointing that out.
The case that hung the first time around when the jury was given information about sexual molestation, and then the prosecution in the second time around suppressed much of that evidence that was not presented in the second case, and they were convicted and they were sent to prison with life without the possibility of parole.
I mean, George, a lot to unpack there, but obviously these murders were brought to life in this recent Netflix series and other documentaries. But is this recent attention having some bearing on how this case is being re-examined and how you're looking at it? I mean, it sounds as though you may be predisposed to thinking that maybe this needs a second look, and maybe that something needs to happen here.
Well, the petitions were filed by the defense about a year ago. We have been, we go through a very thorough process. We have a photocopy of a letter that allegedly one of the brothers sent to a cousin talking about molestation. We have the evidence that came out a couple of years ago about the Menudo band member talking about his molestation. We have done about 300 resentencing cases since I've been in office, and only 4 have reoffended. And the reason that I attribute to that is we're very careful about looking at all the circumstances in the case. The reason why we have become more public is because after the documentary, we began to get, many requests from media and others about where was the case. The case is actually scheduled.
Okay, just really quick. Sheila just said, if they have this new evidence, they should get a new trial. Really quick, Sheila, I don't think that they should get a new trial. I personally think they should get a resentencing. I think a third trial would be devastating I don't even think they'd want, and I mean, of course they'd want it, right? If they had to choose, if it was that or stay in prison. But I just feel like a resentencing would be appropriate because they could be sentenced to, right, manslaughter, 20 years, time served, and then they'd leave, they'd get released. So I think that is the best case scenario for them because, oh my gosh, can you imagine them having to get on the stand and half of the witnesses are dead at this point, half of the it'd be crazy. But again, if it's stay in prison forever or have a new trial, yeah, I think they would choose that. Yes, but that's where I'm at. Yeah, definitely. All right, I'll go back to the way this was. Sorry. Oh, of course.
For a hearing on November 29th. But for the documentary, quite frankly, we probably would not be talking at this point. We may be talking later, but that certainly has increased the attention by the public, and that's what we're being public about where we are.
And George, I mean, let's talk about the aspect of this that is really coming to light once again. Although you did say it came up in the original trial, and that is that these brothers, it's believed they were sexually abused. They say they were sexually abused. And do you think it's possible that folks looking at these allegations now will say, okay, these murders happened, but, because of these circumstances, maybe these 2 brothers have served enough time and they should be able to be free and move on with their lives?
Sorry. Spit it out.
I mean, Jim, even if you look at the first trial, right, the first jury hung when some of that evidence was presented. So clearly, even 35 years ago, people had concerns, but there is no question that our sensitivity to sexual assault is much more significant today. We also, I think, has been clearly established that both men and women can be sexually assaulted, or boys and girls. I think, 35 years ago, cultural norms were a little different. So I do agree with you, and Camila kind of raised that issue, that there's no question that a jury today would look at this case probably very differently that a jury did in 35 years ago. But even 35 years ago, when some of this evidence was presented, there was certainly doubt as to whether they were guilty of first-degree murder. Right? Again, there's no question that they committed the killing. The question is, to what degree of culpability should they be held accountable to, given the totality of the circumstances?
And I do want to have you listen to this comment from Mark Garagos, attorney for the Menendez brothers, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
They've been model prisoners. They have worked tirelessly in the face of literally no ability or expectation that they would ever get out to reform. And now we fast forward 35 years later, we've got a much more robust and evolved understanding of abuse, that yes, abuse can occur both with females and with males. I think it's time. Their family thinks it's time.
Yeah, George, what do you think about what Mr. Garagos says there?
Well, I think Mark raises, points that there is no disagreement on my end. First of all, we all know that both boys and girls, men and women, can be sexually assaulted, and I believe that the issue of their efforts to rehabilitate appear to be very valid, and that's one of the things that we're checking into. Because absolutely, they had no prospect of getting out of prison. They probably thought they would be there for the rest of their life. So that certainly speaks very highly to their commitment to be a different human being, perhaps as they were 35 years ago. And I think that all plays a role in what will be my final decision.
And I don't want to push you on a final decision too much right here, but to read between the lines, George, it does sound as though that you feel like this needs another look.
Well, Jim, unquestionably, and that is a reason why we started to take another look, months ago. But clearly, that is a reason why I'm speaking to you and others today, because look, we have both a moral and an ethical obligation. If there was evidence that should have been presented, and if it were presented to a jury, would that have brought a different outcome? We have an obligation to take that into consideration as we move forward.
All right, George Gascon, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Please keep us posted.
Okay, so one thing I also want to add, and I agree with Mark Garagos, and I think that a huge part of this is the fact that they have been model prisoners, and part of getting released from prison or being granted parole is your ability to appear at least to be rehabilitated. So it sounds like, based on their time in prison, where Lyle runs a support group for sexually abused men, I mean, they're doing everything right, and they've had no intentions or they've had no thoughts that they would ever actually be released. So this was just them being themselves. They don't have any type of history of violence in prison. They don't have any type of history of, getting into fights and arguments. I know at the beginning it was hard for both brothers, especially being separated. Oh, hi, Nini. So I agree with that. And I think that's going to be a huge part of when they're looking at the case and all of the different aspects with the new evidence, with information and evidence being withheld in the second trial. I think that along with the last 20 years and their temperament in prison and how they've acted, that's going to play a huge role in hopefully getting them a new trial or resentenced. And I think the resentencing thing is what I believe to be the best course of action. And I think that most people would agree. But I want to play you, and I have it queued up, the debate between Nathan Hochman and George Gascon for DA. I want to play the part that I've queued up. Hi, Taryn. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Okay. So listen to this part of the debate. It is interesting, and I see exactly where he's coming from. I'm going to make it bigger. Sorry. But let's hear your thoughts on this after I play this back and forth. Gonna just make it bigger. All right.
The Menendez case. It's in the news, big case. Mr. Gascon, last week you announced that the convictions and sentences of Eric and Lyle Menendez are going to get a new look from your office. Attorneys have been trying to get your office to look at this case since May of 2023. The investigative journalist who uncovered the new evidence, I spoke with him, Robert Rand. He told KNX News he was caught by surprise that you decided to proceed now. Why did you decide right before the election that you're going to take a look at the case after you've been postponing it for a year and a half? And what makes you conclude, as you said on KNX News the other day, that the brothers are, quote, rehabilitating very well?
So let me begin by saying that you're absolutely right. The case was presented. We have both the resentencing units and we have a unit that also look at habeas. They're two different vehicles. And this is an area where we have worked very hard with many cases. We have resentenced now over 300 people. By the way, only 4 of those have reoffended.
He says that all the time.
But when
I get it.
and this case, by the way, is set up for a hearing on November 29th on the habeas part. But when there was a recent Netflix documentary that came out, and we immediately started to get bombarded with media requests and calls because the case came back again to the surface. And the decision was made that rather than answer one media request at a time, that we would actually just come out and very clearly said where we are.
I'm okay with that.
There is difference of opinion in my office. There are some people that believe that the Menendez brothers should continue to stay in prison. And there are other people that believe that there are other things that are on board. We believe that it's worthy of a second look, and we're taking that second look, and I will make an evaluation accordingly.
I don't think you answered my question. It sounds like you're saying because this Netflix documentary came out, we're taking a second look, but the actual originally documentary came out in May of 2023, and that's when the attorneys filed.
Yeah, that's not what I said. What I said to you is, we had a hearing scheduled for November 29th of this year. This case has been moving along the track with many other cases. When this Netflix documentary started to show recently, we started to get many media requests for information. Initially, we tried to answer them individually. I came to the conclusion that it was better to handle it all at once, and that's what we did. So again, it's not that we haven't had this. It's not that this case wasn't on track to be reviewed. The difference is we have been experiencing a tremendous amount of questions about the case, and we wanted to put this to bed and say, number one, we're reviewing the case, and number two, we will have a decision shortly. And by the way, the decision will be mine. There are differences of opinion in my office. I'm evaluating both of it, but I will make the final decision.
And your time on that is up at Mr. Hochman.
Actually, Mr. Hochman, my question for
Can I
you.
respond to that, the Menendez question very briefly?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But I didn't even use his name.
The timing is incredibly suspicious. The habeas was filed in May 2023. In February of 2024, the request for resentencing was given to the DA's office. But why October 3rd did Mr. Gascon have a press conference to basically announce that he was thinking about the case? Why not back in May of 2023 or February of 2024? Could it be because Mr. Quilly, one of our reporters here, came out with an article that day? The headline of the LA Times said, "Teen Killer Case Haunts Gascon."
Oh,
That was a case about Shanice Dyer,
I didn't know
a
that.
woman who was 17 years old. She actually engaged in a double murder, a gang murder. She killed Alberto Carrera, a man who was actually celebrating the birth of his son with a baby shower, and Jose Flores, someone who was visiting him, who was an astrophysicist on the way to Nassau. Shanice Dyer went into their community looking for someone to kill because it was a gang retaliation, killed these two individuals. Mr. Gascon went ahead and changed the policy, and she should have been tried as an adult. She was scheduled to be so. She got tried as a juvenile because of Mr. Gascon.
All right, you're way over time now.
Wait.
But
Mr.
please,
Gascon,
finish.
And
let's Mr.
I think
Gascon.
I did.
4 years.
But Mr. Gascon.
Here's where my opponent really shows is either his lack of understanding of process or his willingness
Hi,
to lie.
Sammy.
Let me give you a hypothetical because I am not allowed to talk about juvenile cases. There are cases that come to us where we know that there are many reasons to mitigate the case, where human trafficking is involved, where people are being forced and put under duress to do certain things. And as a prosecutor, we are required to look at that as well. If you look at how cases are handled in the office today, actually, they're very consistent with state law. There have only been 5 transfers in the last year or year plus because the law is different. As a matter of fact, both prosecutors and defense attorneys in this particular case, on the first case around, would say that that case was very unlikely to be transferred. And it is really interesting how convenient my opponent talks about a case like this, either knowing or in total ignorance of how the system works.
All right, Mr. Gascon, thank you. Mr. Hochman, to Emily's
I
question, to
have
circle
a-
back.
Yeah,
to the
I
Menendez
actually have
Brothers
a
case.
Menendez question for you too.
Thank you.
So
Here.
should the murder convictions of Eric and Lyle Menendez or the sentencing, should they be reviewed? And how would you approach this type of case where in 2024, child abuse could be considered a mitigating factor?
So obviously, I don't have the inside track that Mr. Gascon has about the facts of that case. In fact, I do believe that Mr.
Maybe
Gascon
good.
hasn't even bothered to talk to the prosecutors who've been involved with that habeas petition for over a year and a half when he had his press conference conveniently on the
boy.
same day that Mr. Quilly came out with his article that said teen killer case haunts Gascon. But here's my methodology. I would get deep into the facts. That's the advantage of actually having prosecuted and defended cases, real cases, for 34 years. Mr. Gascon doesn't know what I'm talking about because he's never done that. And so I would talk to all the relevant parties. I would talk to the experts. I would meet with defense counsel and any defense experts that they want me to meet with. Ultimately, I would gather all those facts, gather all the opinions, and make a decision. And you certainly would not have me hold a press conference to tell you I'm just thinking about it.
Oh,
All right, you're listening and watching a KNX News and LA Times LADA debate. We have George Gascon
okay.
and Nathan Hochman with us here.
Wow.
And we're going to James Quilly at the LA
What
Times.
did you all think about that? Okay, so I had not watched that before. That was a really interesting perspective. He said, this is what I would do, but what I wouldn't do is hold a press conference to say that I'm thinking about it. Okay, I have a theory about the press conference and why it was held, and it doesn't really have anything to do with what Hochman said, which I believe it. That also makes sense. If he had some bad press that day and he had to do some damage control and sort of look like a hero to, let's say, 60% of people who believe that the Menendez brothers should be released, and that's why he did it, fine. Okay. However, I do feel like, yeah, if you guys saw, and I deleted some of these videos because I didn't know how to navigate this, but I get emails before before certain stories hit the mainstream media. I'll get an email about it just being on these press lists. So you guys probably saw last week, I posted, I got this note that Extra said Gascon supports their resentencing. So I was like, wow, okay, I'm going to run with this. I want to be the first to get the news out. This is crazy. This is awesome. And then they said, oh yeah, and he'll probably hold a press conference at some point. But there was no information about the press conference. But anyway, in the article, it said sources tell, and I remember this, I took one screenshot of the headline, but I didn't screenshot the article, and I wish I did. But it said, sources tell Billy Bush that George Gascon supports a resentencing of the brothers. And he called their sentencing, original sentencing, a travesty of justice. There was a quote and everything. And I did look at some other LADA articles. They tend to use that phrase, travesty of justice, a lot. But anyway, yeah. So Nini, you remember that. Yeah, it was deleted, whatever. Well, finally, and I deleted that too. I'm like, I think this press conference is happening, but the Extra article has been deleted. But then I started seeing it pop up on TMZ and other media outlets. And it just said, it didn't say anything about him supporting a resentencing. It said that he'd be holding a press conference about the new evidence. And it's just funny that we call it new evidence. I've been talking about this since the documentary came out on Peacock, the Menendez doc. But anyway, so when he gets up to speak, it's funny because now I'm thinking, all right, he has to act like he's weighing all the options when really I do think he already made up his mind and he supports the resentencing, but he had to go up there and backpedal because this article was preemptively released or published. And this is my opinion. I don't have hard proof that that's why they rescinded the article, but it sounds like it could be possible. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I think, yeah, at this point, he had to backpedal. So Hochman did make some good points about the timing, but I thought that Gascon also made some good points. Like he was getting pressure because of the documentary, because of the Ryan Murphy series. So I understand that, but I think they were getting pressure in 2023 as well with the Menendez Menudo doc, and the new evidence was actually filed in 2023. But I haven't done the research to know exactly what was going on in LA at that time. If there was anything, I mean, what was going on then? I can't even, was that like the Britney Spears conservatorship stuff? Like, I don't know. There could have been other things that were going on that just was better for his career. Because, like, let's be honest, DAs are essentially politicians. And so they do go whichever way is going to make them look best. Yes, I saw that. I totally agree. And that's a huge part of this, their activism, their rehabilitation. And I mentioned at the beginning, Lyle and Eric have been model prisoners and they run support groups for sexually abused boys. And yeah, I feel for them, because imagine like getting your hopes up and it doesn't happen. So I would understand why they're not really commenting about a potential release. Totally makes sense. But now Hochman is ahead in the polls. And so what does this mean if George Gascon loses? And I believe the election is November 5th. And I'm confused about the next hearing. He said the 29th, and then the woman on the press conference, the one that he did last week, she came out and said, no, it's the 26th. And then they keep saying it's the 29th. So between the 26th and the 29th, there will be another hearing. That's when Gascon said he hopes to have finality around the case. However, if he loses, that's going to be up to the new DA. And I think it depends on what they do with the office. If they clean house, if they keep the same people, that depends on them. But let's say Gascon loses, but hopefully the prosecutors in the office are, Menendez supporters of them getting resentenced. Maybe they can push that on Hochman if he is weighing it. And he said it himself. He does want to work with the prosecutors on the case. He wants to get into all the details and make sure he knows every little thing. And I have to imagine if that's the case and that's what he wants to do, he will, I feel like, be in agreement that they deserve to be resentenced. I do feel like based on the law, based on the facts, and let's say even if you don't believe that they were ever abused, let's say you don't believe that at all. Well, based on the second trial, that right there, I feel like the second trial was completely unconstitutional. So based on those facts, I mean, maybe that could get them a resentencing or at least a new trial. So I guess we'll see. I'll leave that there, but it is something I have been thinking about. But I'm not worried, I guess, if that makes sense. If he loses, I'm not worried. I thought what Hochman said was very promising. So, and yes, Sheila, 100%. Whoever wins will have to basically, submit themselves to all of this public pressure. Absolutely. I know it is sad that it's become so political. You're totally right. You're totally right. But the elements of the first trial, I mean, yeah, and I talked to, what I can do actually right now, which would be kind of fun. I don't know if anybody saw my interview with Hazel. I know some of you guys did, but let me pull up a part. She is just like, oh my gosh, she's so lovely. And somebody said the other day that Hazel should honestly teach courses on how to be a better juror, which is like, actually, it's kind of true. She was really an amazing juror. Hey, Afton. But let me just show you part of our interview. I'm going to pull it up right now just because I loved certain things to say. Let me, okay, pulling this back up. I'm going to get to the part. And I was like, God, I had so many questions for her. And she was so tired. If you can imagine, like she was such a trooper. I had so many questions, but she was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing so many hits on this. And I'm just like, she's like, I'm exhausted. I truly am. And this only happens to her, she kind of said, in waves, right? Every decade, I guess. Or at first it was like, hey, it's the 10-year anniversary of the sentencing. It's the 20-year anniversary of the sentencing. I know my pause faces are so silly. Let me go back and see where when they picked you and you were in that courtroom.
You have dealing with the stress of what was going on. Even Lyle in this current documentary says they were in a fog of emotions, and Eric says he was covering the pain of even being alive at that point in time, during that period of time. So if all you have is circumstantial evidence, the people say, oh, circumstantial evidence isn't evidence. Well, yes, it is. Circumstantial evidence is evidence. And the judge said constantly, if you have two reasonable explanations for a piece of evidence, a piece of circumstantial evidence, you are to go with the explanation that points to innocence, not with the explanation that points towards guilt.
Doubt, huh? Right. Yeah, totally. And I think for me, one thing that I had a hard time with the story is the fact that, and I don't know how accurate this is because I have to go back and read the transcripts, but I don't necessarily believe that that night they felt like their lives were in danger. Like if they didn't act, their parents were going to kill them. I felt like they had it. You know, when Jose Menendez allegedly said, Eric, wait for me up in your room, they were like, oh, hell no, we are not doing this. We need to do something about this. I don't think they necessarily thought their parents were plotting to kill them that night. Do you agree with that?
Do you believe that their parents may have been plotting to kill them at some point in time?
That I'm not sure. I have a hard time with that because Jose was so obsessed with this outer appearance of his family that I'm not sure.
That's the reason they were afraid, is because they were threatening to expose him. And
Right.
So
I think that also that part is where maybe Hazel and I, we pretty much agree on everything. I think that this part of the story is where I tend to get a little fuzzy. And this is, I do this, I feel like, with a lot of cases. I will say, well, like, and I do this with the Karen Reed case. I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily believe that Karen hit John with her car. It doesn't make sense based on what I've heard in the trial, based on evidence. But also, I'm not certain that there was some kind of conspiracy beatdown in the house and the people beat him. And, you know, I'm just like, this is where I believe both sides have a point here. So, for the Menendez brothers, my only thing was like, okay, I believe in the defense of imperfect self-defense. I believe that this is what they genuinely felt like they had to do because they were in fear. I don't know if it's the fear that their parents would kill them per se, but it is the fear that they would be continually harmed, which could lead to death by, you know, suicide or a physical fight between them. It's just, you know, it's like I have a hard time, but I'm all for the imperfect self-defense, if that makes sense. I don't think that anybody could live in a household like that. So I really don't think that. And so, but then Hazel did change my mind and make me kind of think, well, yeah, they believed at some point Jose would hurt them because they were going to tell. And that's when I was like, okay, that's a good point. If word got out that Jose was what he was and what he was doing to them, that would destroy him. That would ruin him. So yes, that makes sense. So maybe they really were terrified that Jose would kill them. But how do you explain Kitty in the sense that what she did was horrific? And I've said this, I can't even go down that road, allowing that to happen. But it just goes down to the whole, well, how do you explain that savagery, that brutality? Especially when the brothers have said at multiple times, or you know, they've kind of said, well, they also wanted to put their mother out of her misery in a way. So that, I think that's hard. That is hard to justify. However, they've been punished for these things 35 years. And that's where I always come down to. I'm always like, yeah, regardless, they've done their time, they've served their time. And I truly do believe, just to wrap this up, that yeah, this was a manslaughter case, murder 2 at best. But as Hazel says in our interview, the women could not even agree on murder 2 because she didn't feel like the prosecution met the burden for murder 2. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. But I'll play what Hazel says to me, which kind of made me go, oh, okay, that actually does make sense.
So
Right.
whether the parents were ever planning to kill them, they obviously weren't planning to kill them at that moment. But that's the whole theory of the first case. It's called imperfect self-defense. And that's what was not allowed for the second trial jury to even consider.
Oh yeah, that I can't when I talk about the second trial, I get upset. I mean, and just to put it in perspective, for me, it's like just Diddy, for example. Diddy, I don't care what happens to him. I think he's a piece of shit. I think he's guilty.
But I'm
Mhm.
having a hard time because I don't think he's going to get a fair trial. And I just feel like, we live in the United States and everybody is entitled to a fair trial based on the Constitution. He's already being tried in the media. That's my whole thing. I think he's guilty though. But with the Menendez brothers, it's like the second trial. It blows my mind what went down. And I tweeted something last night because I thought I knew all the details, Hazel. I really did. But I did not know that Judge Weisberg did not give the second jury murder 2 or manslaughter. I mean, hello. Of course, they deliberated in an hour. The brothers admitted to doing this. So if you
Yeah, that was a whole I had no idea, you guys. I don't know if you had any clue, but that again, it goes back to Karen Reed. I know, Taryn, I know you remember this, but the jury slip didn't have not guilty for manslaughter or for murder. Sorry, it was they had not guilty for manslaughter or murder 2 or leaving the scene. It was just a not guilty checkbox. It was just so bad. And it just seemed so whack. And I was like, wow, okay. So you have the first jury that took a month to deliberate. They could not agree. They were deadlocked. Okay, that says something. And then you have the second jury that took less than an hour and it was 12-0 vote, unanimous voting for murder. Yeah, of course. When the brothers admitted to doing it and it's murder or nothing, look, what did we all think was going to happen here? What did we think the outcome was going to be?
you give them murder and not guilty, well, what the hell are they going to pick? But
And if you compound that by the prosecution saying there's no evidence of abuse when the evidence of abuse wasn't allowed to be presented, that's
yeah. And think about this. I mean, the penalty phase, you see cases now where they fly in somebody's first grade teacher just to paint a picture of what went on in their brain and why they maybe committed this crime to preserve their life. And they didn't even get that. And that is another thing that blows my mind, why I felt like their second trial was just unconstitutional. But I want to ask you, Leslie Abramson, she is a force. She is brash. And lawyers are not necessarily supposed to affect the jury. If you like the lawyer, if you don't like the lawyer, it shouldn't really matter. But I have to.
Okay. So speaking of that really quick, I'm going to find a clip from TMZ, I believe, or Extra. They actually got Leslie Abramson on camera. They chased her at the gas station. I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm going to grab that clip right now to show you. She clearly doesn't want to talk, but she does. She says enough, but let me grab it. It's only a minute. She looks really different. I'm not throwing shade or anything, but I'm just like, wow, just, and obviously Pam Bozanich looks very different too. She looks much older. It's been a long time, but all right. Where is she? Yeah, there she is.
Hi, Leslie. How are you?
Good. Eric's pitbull lawyer, who became a media sensation during his and Lyle's 2 trials in the 90s, retired last year. Abramson has stayed out of the spotlight, but cameras tracked her down in the wake of the news that LA District Attorney George Gascon is reviewing their case for possible resentencing.
How do you feel that the Menendez brothers might be getting their case reviewed?
I make no comments about my clients, none whatsoever. Attorney-client privilege never died.
The renewed interest in the case is coming on the heels of the Menendez Brothers documentary where they speak from behind bars.
Everyone asks why we kill their parents.
And of course, the Monsters series from Brian Murphy.
We did it! Have you seen the documentary, Leslie?
No.
You haven't
Documentary?
No, in the series on Netflix. Have you?
That I heard about? No, I don't watch any of those.
You're not watching any of it, Leslie?
No, and I didn't watch the last series, and I don't watch any of the shows about it.
Leslie's only comment in the Netflix documentary was, "No amount of media nor teenage petitions will alter the fate of these clients. Only the courts can do that, and they have ruled." The next hearing in their case is set for November 29th.
Yeah. So I had to show you guys that. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, you have to wonder if Leslie speaks to them, or you have to wonder if they had an ongoing relationship in prison, she and Eric, because they don't really talk about that ever. Oh, hey, Forrest. Nice to see you. Wait, I know, Nini. She totally got even shorter, completely shorter. That was so nuts. I mean, I'm not throwing shade. I time can be cruel, right? And she clearly does not want to be in the spotlight, but I loved that she still seemed to have that same attitude, that same gruffness that we saw in the courtroom. So love that. Love that for her. And yeah, the aging process really does suck. Like I said, I turned 40 this summer, and it's been, yes, it's been a lot of does this look okay? Is this how, or do I have wrinkles? Yeah. So you guys get it. You get it. Yes, Sheila, she's still as feisty as ever. Now, I want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out with Menendez right now, just because I feel like I've been covering so much of this case and the stories and everything lately that I don't want to repeat myself too many times. But again, I don't want to leave anything out. But for now, let's move on to recapping Diddy from yesterday. So I did do a quick Pop Crime TV article on my website, and my website is popcrime.tv. And I put just some details in there that I gathered mainly from Laura Engel. Laura was inside the courtroom yesterday, and she did a news hit with Banfield last night. So something interesting that Laura said is that Diddy appeared to be smiling in the courtroom, and he frequently turned around and looked back and smiled at his family and gave like a prayer, like a prayer thing symbol. I don't know what you say with clasping your hands together. So she also said that he wasn't handcuffed. He wasn't wearing shackles that she could see, but he did look pretty gaunt. And what did she say? She said he looked like he was depuffed, which I thought was really funny. Depuffed. And I was texting with her this morning, and she was like, I just thought about that. Like, I didn't even think about puffy and saying depuffed. It just came out. And I was like, wow, that's really good. Wait, Sheila, you're so funny. Nick and his step. I feel bad. I didn't say bye to Nick after I saw him yesterday. Darn it. He was so nice to me. Oh, and he came up after and he's like, oh, I didn't tell you my niece's last name on the video because I wasn't sure if she'd want me. And I'm like, dude, if she's an ADA, her name is literally public. Like, why would you think that it's like, you can find any name that you want that works in the DA's office? Like, it's so silly. Yeah, so Diddy appeared to be very gaunt in court, very thin. And we saw a few reports recently that he was on a hunger strike of sorts. He was afraid that he would be poisoned through food. And this report was from a former inmate, so we don't know if there is actually validity to that. However, I believe that he looked thinner because he's in a stressful situation. There's different food. I mean, I can imagine the food at MDC is not great. So, and she also said the MDC, like prison garb, I guess. She said she was confused at first because it kind of looked like it was a leisurely jumpsuit type of thing. It just didn't look like a prison uniform. So that was interesting. But she said overall, he appeared to be in good spirits. That's interesting. Now, Diddy is a performer by trade, by nature. He's used to being in the public eye, putting on a face, putting on a show. So maybe it's partially that. But here's what we do know, and I wrote this in my article. Federal prosecutors disclosed that Sean Diddy Combs could face additional charges, possibly expanding the case against him beyond sex trafficking, racketeering, and prostitution charges. In his first court appearance with the new judge, I'm going to avoid pronouncing his name. A trial date of May 5th, 2025 was set. Despite smiling as he entered the court, he appeared to give a prayer symbol and smile at his family, according to those inside. Combs is facing serious accusations tied to his alleged involvement in freak-offs, gatherings involving coerced sex. His defense team is pushing for a speedy trial and seeking to exclude leaked evidence. I don't think the video is leaked evidence, but I'll get there. Including the damning 2016 video of Combs assaulting then-girlfriend singer Cassie. Both sides have agreed to avoid media statements without a gag order. Okay, and that makes sense too. Onlookers noticed that Combs looked much thinner than he normally does. News Nation correspondent Laura Ingle. Okay, I already read that part. That was I did an image from when I got Agnifilo. Finally, it was the silliest thing. I waited all that time, but now it makes sense. They agreed to not say much to the media without a court order. So I guess that's interesting. Yes, and then I promoted my live stream. So yes, I have talked about that. Tony Garagos is one of Diddy's attorneys, and that's cool. I mean, they have a really tough job. And I've said this before. I said this yesterday on my live. I respect defense attorneys. They have a job to do, but I didn't love in the 31-page motion that they really seemed to victim shame Cassie. I thought that was not even cool at all. Not cool at all. So I'm going to change my banner. Yeah, their portrayal of Cassie really upset me, only because they made it seem like, oh, Cassie was also very addicted to drugs at this time and she didn't know what she was doing and she didn't have, and I'm like, okay, he forced her to do all those drugs. That's what was going on here. It really was against her will. She had no way. She was in survival mode. So let me see here. So I'm going to remove this. But yeah, so that is what happened in court yesterday. Now, there isn't, supposedly there isn't another pretrial hearing until December. But that doesn't mean that Diddy won't be in the appellate court trying to get bail or get released pending trial. So I guess, we'll see what happens there. But while I have you guys, I recorded an episode of Nancy Grace yesterday. I was on this panel, and you know what? I'm going to pull this up now because I think this story is really important, and I think that everybody can also learn from this story. I'm going to share this instead. So let me change my banner really quick. This is Chanti Dixon. Wait, you're so funny. The TMZ report, Taryn. Let me change this. I'm going to change the banner here. Oh, gosh, I have to delete one. Okay. This is Chanti Dixon. So our episode of Nancy has not aired yet, but doing this episode yesterday, I was severely disturbed. Like, I did not know about this case. It happened in September, and I didn't hear about it. It was out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Afton, can you ask your... Oh, yeah. The paralegals claim yesterday, that was so weird when he got up in the microphone and yeah, that was very, very odd. I feel like that wasn't supposed to happen. I think he just wanted his 5 minutes of fame. But anyway, okay. Chanti Dixon, Indianapolis, Indiana. Chanti Dixon was killed, and I know, Taryn, horrible. So I had no idea about this case, but it brings me back to the fact that she was killed at the hands of her Uber driver. And growing up, I don't know about you, but I feel like the number one thing our parents always tell us is don't get in the car with a stranger. It's just one of those rules. And like, here we are in 2024, And what do? We have Ubers where we literally get in cars with strangers. And it's perfectly acceptable. And unfortunately, this type of stuff still happens. So, Chanti Dixon, and I implore everybody to watch the episode on Nancy when it's released, because she goes into a lot of additional detail about just safety and about how certain criminals are really stupid in trying to cover up their tracks here and doing things like this, and how it's like, if you're an Uber driver, there is a digital footprint that will direct law enforcement right back to you. So Uber drivers, don't do this. Just don't do this. So Chanti Dixon, mother of two, reports online and by her friends say that she was silly, she was funny, and she was very devoted to her children, who are 13 and 10. And so Chanti worked nights to support her children. She worked at a gentleman's club. And this is another thing. Her mother went on the news and she was like, "Oh, you thought that nobody would care about a stripper if you were to do this to her? Well, we do care." Okay. Like it was sad. It was awful. So that's one thing about this case, is that, did he see where he was picking her up? And did he think to himself, "Oh, well, this is an easy target"? I don't know. We don't know enough. He actually was just indicted and arrested about, I think it was either last week or the week before. So picks her up at right around this gentleman's club. And this area, I looked it up. It's Washington Street in Indianapolis. And it's kind of a dodgy area, but it's a really busy area. There was a bunch of shootings there previously, the year before. And then actually some this summer as well, actually near the gentleman's club. But she gets picked up there and she has to make one other stop. And that stop, and I'm sorry, I said Washington Street. Where she was picked up was by West 16th Street in Indianapolis. That's the dodgy area. She had to make one stop going to Washington Street. Washington Street, that area is super busy. Bars, arcades, clubs. So she stopped there and she got whatever it was she needed, and then they proceeded on the ride home. So she called the Uber by 3:34 a.m. and by 4:05 a.m. the ride had ended and the driver was given a $5 tip. Chanti never made it home that night. So her mother was like very worried. Obviously, her kids were worried, and her mom, they went to her house and they found her Apple Watch, and they were able to just turn that on location wise to find her phones. So they went to look, and they're following it, and they are following the path that it shows to find her phone. And they end up in a very, like, almost 2 blocks away from the house in a wooded area. And there's kind of like a dumpster and just some concrete. And sadly, it was her mother. Her mother's name is Risa. Her mother sees her daughter, her body face down, almost crumpled up with a sweatshirt covering her head, and totally naked everywhere else. And there's a romper next to her with the straps broken. And her mother is just like, oh my gosh, she is beside herself. She is screaming. She's frantic. So she calls 911. The cops come down and they end up, canines find Chanti's wallet and her phone a few yards away. So her mom knows her password. They open up her phone and they can see her last activity was this Uber ride. So they open up the Uber app. They're able to see who the driver was. They see the vehicle and they see the vehicle was registered to XYZ woman. Turns out that is his mother, this Uber driver's mother. His name is Francisco Valadez. Let's see if that's him right there. I'll get a little closer. Can't really. Okay. So that's Francisco Valadez. He is 29 years old and he lives with his mom and he is an Uber driver. So police, I'm going to go back to Chanti because Chanti is beautiful and I would much rather look at her. So Chanti did get the ride from Francisco Valadez. Police go to his house and they show her picture and he just is like, oh yeah, she was in my car. Nothing crazy happened. And then they're like, oh, well, she never showed up. You know, she never made it home. And then he changes his story and he says, okay, well, this is what happened. And what does he do? He blames a black man. So he says, well, actually, we were in the middle of an intersection and we got pulled over and, you know, this black man held us up and wanted all of Chanti's stuff. He was robbing her and she said no. And so he shot her in the thigh and then she ran away. And then he said he called emergency services an hour later, or sorry, but he said he called a non-emergency service line, meaning like the local police office or something like that, not 911. And he said no one answered. So I'm not sure yet, Sheila, because he was just arrested last week, but you're probably right. There probably was some outside of the gentleman's club. So, but either way, it's almost like that's great if they have it, but they don't really need it. They've got it all already on the app. So he changes that story. He blames the black man and says that, oh yeah, she was shot in the thigh. I offered to call help for her. She said no, but an hour later I called. So then he says, I also cleaned the blood out of the car myself when I didn't hear back from anyone. And they're like, okay. And his mom actually corroborated that story and saying that, oh yeah, there's supplies, cleaning supplies, and there's some bloody towels in his bedroom. And so then police are like, okay, we need to get this guy down to the station. And babe, we're going to tell you why. It's because she wasn't shot in the thigh. She was shot in the head. Chanti was found with a gunshot wound to the temple. And now this is where he ends up admitting to what he did. And guys, I'm going to give you a trigger warning right now because this is one of the most disturbing things I have heard in a very long time. And I think part of his story is absolute BS. Part of it could be true, but I have a feeling, and I'll explain. I'll break this down. So, but let me finish before you guys maybe say that this is not true or this is whatever. So what he said was he was driving her and maybe they were talking. I mean, I don't know. I have a feeling like, I don't think she wanted to be super chatty. Again, I'm just speculating based on how I would be. If I worked a full night and it's 3:30 in the morning, bro, shut up and drive. I literally don't care. So I have a hard time believing that she was into making this small talk with him and she would even agree to this, whatever. So he says at first, he tells her he's a 30-year-old virgin and he offers her money to have sex. And he says that she said, yeah, okay. I have a really hard time believing this. He then said that at one point, and this is after he admits to shooting her and he has multiple excuses, but he then says that he shot her out of self-defense because she was slapping the back of his head. Well, yeah, if you're allegedly graping her, I'm sure she was doing a lot worse. So, but according to him, she just was in the back of the car, slapping him in the head. Just got off work, ready to go home. But yeah, let me just slap my driver in the head. Makes perfect sense. So yeah, I'm definitely BS. So they, then he ends up saying, okay, well, this is what happened. As I'm on top of her, and it seems like he's kind of admitting to this grape, I guess he pulled his pants down. And this, when you read reports, I actually had to go deep to get this information. When he pulled his pants down, she made fun of his private part. And which I'm kind of like, if that is true, I love her. And I think that is, I mean, I think that if she, it's a horrific act that is happening to her. I mean, it is awful, but this girl is so strong and so brave that if she actually did say that, I mean, I think that's kind of badass of her. And she seems incredibly tough. So, but who knows? I mean, who knows? But he said, so what he said was when she said this, made fun of his whatever, allegedly, he got angry and then he shot her in the temple. Then, after he did that, he stripped her, he threw her out of his car, and these are his words, he decided to have another go at it. Didn't work, so he did it himself, right there next to her on, I don't know, all the details, hasn't been released in these reports. I believe, okay, so I have the indictment and the affidavit, and I can share that right now. I do have it if you guys are interested. I don't know why they stripped the victims. And it's funny, I wasn't planning on going into this case. I guess I really was going to do Diddy and the Menendez brothers, but I really do think that this case needs to be heard. I mean, I was, hold on, sorry, my phone. I was upset that I had never heard this case, and I was upset, and I just kept thinking, okay, is it because she was a stripper? I mean, is that why it didn't really seem to make the mainstream media news? I don't know, but it upset me. And yeah, Taryn, that's it. He thought nobody would care. And so that's why I'm like, oh my gosh, I do want to spotlight this, and I'm so happy that Nancy did as well, just because it's a terrifying story. And also, we use Ubers every day. But before I get into the indictment really quick, I do want to share with you certain things that Ubers have done to improve safety measures. So you can actually record an entire Uber ride audio. So I know, thank you. I totally agree. And you know what? I'll probably change my icon as well. The icon I make on YouTube to add this story here, because I think people should pay attention. So anyway, so they have an option now where you can record the entire Uber ride. And then they have an option where you can share your trip status. And that's what I have all my babysitters do, is share their trip status with me. So I know when they are almost home, when they're home. And if ever an Uber stops and it's before your destination, you don't have a stop added, the Uber will call you and say, we noticed a lack of activity. So I thought that was really great of Uber. But essentially, Francisco Valadez had no criminal past. He had no criminal record. So I don't know, like, what is Uber supposed to do here? And I've been thinking about this. Should they be giving psych evaluations for these drivers, since it is such a personal job? I mean, you're in somebody's personal space. You're in a stranger's car. And yeah, that's on me. I'm the one deciding that I want to do this. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a tough thing to think about here. It's a tough spot to be in, to be Uber. But this, I know. And Taryn, it's interesting. It doesn't sound like his first time, but I think it was. But let's say that it wasn't his first time, or I'm sorry, let's say that it was his first time. I feel like what he did was so horrific, and Indiana does have the death penalty, that this crime and what he did after, I mean, this could warrant the death penalty. And I believe that if he wasn't caught, he would definitely do it again. The fact that he so easily, and yes, Afton, you're also totally right. His first time getting caught, totally. And I'm not sure if Uber drivers have to get fingerprinted when they apply for this job, but I do know that, for example, Brendan Banfield was driving an Uber, and this was after. And if you guys know the au pair double murder case that I've been covering, Banfield wasn't charged with the double murder until last month. So for a year, this mofo is literally driving people around after allegedly being able to stab his wife in the neck and then shoot another man. So allegedly, I'm just saying. So you never know. You never know. But let's go to this. Let me go to and I haven't, guys, I have not read this through at all. This will be let me make this bigger for everybody. Oh, shoot. I have to go soon. Okay. So this is it. State of Indiana, Marion County versus Francisco Valadez. Let's look at, okay. Count 1, murder. Count 2, murder. Count 3, attempted rape. Count 4, attempted abuse of a corpse. Yeah, that's really bad. Really, really bad. Geez, I don't understand why there's 2 counts of murder. And this could be, I have to look up what they are referring to in this because I'm sure. Okay, here we go. Okay, count 1. These are the 2 counts of murder. On or about September 8th, 2024, Francisco Valadez did knowingly or intentionally kill another human being, Chanti Dixon. On or about September 8th, 2024, Francisco Valadez did kill another human being, to wit, Chanti Dixon, while committing or attempting to commit rape, which is to knowingly attempt to have sexual intercourse with Chanti Dixon when Chanti Dixon was compelled by imminent threat of force. Okay. On or about, okay, so it's, okay, part of it is they're including the firearm. Yes. Oh, and Taryn, sorry, I just pinned that. And then I'm saying, happy birthday to your husband, Taryn. Yeah, happy birthday. And as I'm pinning necrophilia. Okay, let's go back down to this, because this makes sense now. So yes, he knowingly or intentionally attempted to have sexual intercourse with Chanti when she was compelled by the imminent threat of force while he was armed with a deadly weapon. So yeah, he held her at gunpoint and raped her, or attempted to rape her. He got frustrated when maybe he couldn't do it and she made fun of him. So, okay, let's go down a little for the probable cause. Okay, this is where, all right, guys, this is where the cameras come in. I just saw some notes about the camera, and Nini, don't worry about it. I misspell things all the time, especially a word like that. I don't expect people to know how to spell words that are so ugly, right? Okay, on Monday, and trigger warning, guys, Monday, September 9th, 2024, officers with IMPD's Southeast District were called to 1800 Wagner for a body found at a dead end. Officers arrived and located the female. She was pronounced dead at 1:10 p.m. The female was naked with a sweatshirt pulled up over her head and arms lying on her stomach. Homicide was requested to the scene. Detective Larry something, along with other homicide detectives, responded. The crime lab was requested to process the scene for evidence. They spoke to RD, who stated that the female found was her daughter, Chanti Dixon. RD stated that her daughter had been missing since early Sunday morning and that her daughter got off work at around 3:30 a.m. Sunday morning at the Sunset Strip and took an Uber to get home. No one had talked to her since. RD had reported her daughter missing at around 9:53 on 9/9 under the case, whatever. And then RD went on to say that they found her daughter when a family member found her Apple Watch in her apartment and used the Find My iPhone application. And then it showed where she was. Okay, the crime scene specialist responded to the scene to process the evidence. During the processing phase, there were items collected. There was a pair of blue latex gloves found south of the victim, an orange BB sandal, located south of the victim, and the sandal appeared to be in a path that looked like, that the victim was drugged through. Next to the victim was a black backpack, an orange sandal, and a green one-piece romper. The detective observed the straps of the romper were ripped, and there was no wallet or cell phone immediately found near the victim. It says this is about the canines locating the phones. The cell phones were fingerprinted and swabbed for DNA and then turned over, and the wallet was found and sent to the crime scene. Her mom, Risa, later confirmed that the cell phone belonged to her daughter. And here we go. So this is where I told you guys the stories that Valadez told. So on the scene, was processed for evidence. The coroner responded. And then back at the homicide office, detective found that Chanti ordered an Uber, and she took the Uber to Washington Street and then left in the same Uber and went to her house. And the ride showed it was completed at 4:05, and there was a $5 tip that was given to the driver. So the Uber driver identified as Francisco Valadez. I'm going to skip through this because I said this. Mr. Valadez said that he did pick up Chanti and began to tell a story that when he dropped her off, there were no issues. He said he dropped her off at the intersection of Prospect and Earhart. Mr. Valadez then made a comment that he had called the non-emergency number. And then when they asked why, he said because when he dropped her off and was driving away, he heard a gunshot. This call was made around 5:30 a.m. after Mr. Valadez got home. Is that a guilt of consciousness? I don't get that. Mr. Valadez then added to the story saying that actually a black male came up to his car while he was dropping her off and tried to rob her, shot her in the thigh. And then he goes on and said he cleaned it up, the blood out of his car. His mom corroborated. And then he took Valadez to the homicide office for an interview. And prior to the interview, the detective read a written waiver of rights to Mr. Valadez, to which Mr. Valadez signed and agreed to speak with the detectives. And then he told the two different stories. And this was the first one he told about the intersection and that the black male suspect came up to the passenger side and shot her. And then he goes in and he tells the other story. So he says that, the detective asks Mr. Valadez, is there any explainable way that once the bullet was recovered from Miss Dixon during the autopsy, if it would match his firearm? So they kind of got him in this. Yeah, they're like, well, we're just going to ask you, is there any possible way that, yeah, this bullet is going to match your gun? To which he said, let me see. I just lost my spot. I'm sorry. Mr. Valadez hesitated for a second and then said, quote, okay, I shot her in the head. It was self-defense. What? Mr. Valadez then told the story about how he was driving Miss Dixon and she was obviously angry about something. And then at some point started slapping him in the head repeatedly. He then said he grabbed his gun, which was in the driver's door, and fired over his shoulder, striking her in the head. He said he panicked, and that is when he took her to the dead end and dumped her body. He made it a point to say that she had her clothes on, and whatever happened after he dumped her, he knew nothing about. When pressed on the details of the story, Mr. Valadez then changed it once again. He admitted that he was a 30-year-old virgin and that he had asked Ms. Dixon to take his virginity. She apparently laughed at first, but then he offered her money and she agreed. I don't buy that. He said they parked at the dead end where her body is later found, and he got in the back to have sex. And then he said that she took off her own clothing and he attempted to have sex with her. And he said that he could not maintain his erection. Sorry, I don't want to say it. He couldn't maintain his erection, and he couldn't do it. And she started laughing at him. And while she supposedly also smacked him in the head. And then he said that at some point he was able to finish in the car. I did not know that. And he shot her after that. She said that to him. He shot her and then he finished in the car. I thought it was outside. And then he said that after shooting her, he drug her out of the car, placed her behind the concrete barrier, and said afterwards that he was looking at her. Oh no, this is awful. And he started to grab at her chest and her stomach and, quote, said, "I figured I would have another go at it." Then he tried to do it again, but still could not. But this is okay. So he did end up finishing on her. It says, I can't. Before he left the scene, he rolled her closer to the concrete barrier, and that is why she was found face down. He also threw her cell phones into the wooded area. And okay, this is the autopsy report. Yeah. I mean, the autopsy report right here says that DNA swabs were taken, or not, sorry, it's not an autopsy report, but it's just some notes. DNA swabs were taken from Miss Dixon's lower abdomen, back, vaginal area, anal, fingernails, and hands. There was a single gunshot wound noted to her left temple. The gunshot wound was a penetrating wound at the immediate range with a trajectory from left to right and slightly upward. And they also noted that she had a tampon in. So that is another reason why I don't believe that she was like, "Oh yeah, let's do it." I mean, what? No, that's so absurd. And oh my God, this guy is such an idiot and such an evil person. Okay, so that was the affidavit. If anybody wants that, or wants a copy of it, let me know, or I can put it in the chat right now if you want it. But it's horrible. And I really, really hope that this I don't want this to go to trial for her kid's sake. I don't think any child would be prepared to hear that about their mother at all. And I don't think it's fair. So I really hope that he takes some kind of plea, life in prison without parole, never see the light of day ever again. I know that's Afton, me too, just because again, a trial would be awful. And look, if you are a big proponent of the death penalty, I think that's different. But for me, I'm kind of like, just for those kids, just end it. And I was thinking about this. When you do something so horrific like this, and let's say you don't get the death penalty, but you get life in prison without parole, I think that there should be something like where you don't get TV for the rest of your life, or you don't get to read books. You don't get any of the same food that other people get. You actually get punished. You get the absolute bare minimum necessities in life if you commit a heinous crime like this one. I don't think it's fair. You shouldn't have simple pleasures. You just shouldn't. And you know what? They do. And that's pretty annoying. And on death row, you actually get more privileges and more pleasures. So yeah, let's end that. But I don't know when that episode of Nancy is airing, but I implore everybody to watch it. It was really powerful with the other experts. So hopefully it airs soon. And my heart just goes out to Chanti's family and her friends. She seemed so beautiful, so wonderful, and just God bless her. But guys, thanks for jumping on with me this morning for this impromptu. I have to run right now. I have something at the kids' school that I'm not going to be late for. So, but I'll catch you guys next week. I'll plan some lives. I know we've got a lot of trials coming up next week, so I got to get everything together. But thanks for watching. That 9-line. And Ted Cruz said, look, if you're not into geopolitics, you won't notice it.